entitled Gossipy Witch Sabotages My Totally Legal Romantic Relationship with My Former Teacher, Ruins Her Career, and Runs Us Both Out of Town. How about I destroy yours and your entire family's whole life, lady? I come from a small town, not just small, but tiny, the kind of place that barely registers on a map. Think of the most uneventful, flyover state pit stop you can imagine, and then strip away any semblance of excitement. That was my hometown. Houses were spaced half a mile apart. The downtown consisted of a single main street with one McDonald's, one department store, and a 3-screen movie theater where everyone gathered on Friday and Saturday nights. Church on Sunday was non-negotiable, and the town lived and died by the fortunes of the high school football team. Everybody knew everybody, or at the very least, everyone knew everyone else's business. My high school graduating class had a grand total of 60 students. Not because we were underachievers, but because there simply weren't many of us. I didn't fit in much, by choice mostly. Looking back now, at almost 26, I cringe at my teenage self. I was a wannabe emo goth rocker. Black eyeliner, chain wallets, the whole 9 yards. I stood out like a sore thumb in a place like that, but not in a way that felt cool or edgy. Still, I got invited to parties, not because anyone particularly liked me, but because there just weren't enough people to exclude. My mom was a staple of the community. She baked cookies and cakes for church events and cut hair at the town's only salon. My dad had a brief stint owning an internet cafe during their peak, but when Wi-Fi became commonplace, he pivoted to running a tax service. He didn't depend much on it though, having served 20 years. As a petty officer in the Navy, his pension was enough to keep him and my mom comfortable. As for me, I worked at the local burger joint that limped along in the shadow of the town's one fast food chain. My boss, a grumpy old man, frequently suggested I let my mom cut my hair to stop looking like a dang girl. Yeah, no thanks. Life in that town was monotony incarnate until Miss Amber Fontaine arrived. She was the new 11th and 12th grade English teacher, and she was a sensation. Her arrival stirred the entire town. Of French descent, she had moved to America in her late teens to attend college in New York. At just 24, she was stunningly beautiful, with a refined, lilting accent that made her English sound melodic. Naturally, every guy in school was enamored with her, while many of the women, particularly the older ones, seemed to resent her. It wasn't just her looks. She carried herself with a kind of elegance that made her seem like she belonged somewhere far more glamorous than our tiny, forgotten town. But she didn't seem to notice or care about the attention. Miss Fontaine was all business, focused entirely on teaching. She kept her personal life private, and no one ever saw her out with anyone in town. It wasn't for lack of interest from the local men. They tried, but she clearly wasn't interested in dating anyone from our little corner of the world. Much later, I would learn that teaching at our high school was just a stepping stone in her career. She had a 2-year plan to gain experience before pursuing her dream of becoming a college professor in a big city. Still, at the time, none of us knew that. We were all too busy harboring crushes on her. In our conservative, church-going town, though, those feelings never went beyond the occasional locker room chatter. Nobody dared cross any lines, and our interactions with her were strictly professional. My most notable interaction with Miss Fontaine during high school happened at my part-time job. One day, she walked into the burger joint, and I was startled to see her there. She greeted me warmly. "Oh hey, OP," she said with a genuine smile. "You have a nice smile. You should do that more often instead of always frowning in school." I was taken aback, but flattered. She ordered a salad, unsurprising, considering she didn't seem like someone who indulged in greasy fast food. When her order was ready, I handed it to her and she thanked me. The following Monday at school, she smiled at me in the hallway and said, "You're learning." It wasn't condescending, just playful. From then on, we exchanged smiles whenever we passed each other, and that was the extent of my romance with Miss Fontaine in high school. But everything changed after graduation. I was 18 and still working at the burger joint. One day, Miss Fontaine walked in again, greeted me warmly and asked, "Are you going to college?" I told her the half-truth. I said I was playing in a band and saving up for community college. The truth was, most of my money went to weed and ecstasy. My band, a so-called emo punk metal fusion, was the center of my life at the time. It was just me on guitar and vocals, Jerry on bass, and Gabe on drums. We were all fresh out of high school, and none of us had plans for higher education. Gabe worked with me at the burger joint, and Jerry, my best friend back in school, worked at the chain fast food place down the street. Our days revolved around skateboarding, getting high, and making music that we thought was groundbreaking. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Looking back now, our sound hasn't aged well at that moment, though I was living the dream, or so I thought. What I didn't realize was that my life was about to take a turn that would change everything. Amber and I started talking more often after she came into the restaurant that day. She told me that now that she was in her second year of teaching, she felt more confident in her role. She even admitted that she wished her current students were as well-behaved and hardworking as I had been. This caught me off guard. I hadn't exactly been a straight A student, but I always earned top marks in English. Reading had always been my thing, even when everything else felt like a drag. I appreciated the compliment, and as she left, she smiled and said, "See you around." A few days later, Amber came back to the restaurant. This time, we got to talking more. Somewhere in the conversation, she asked me if I'd like to go see a movie. I was a little stunned, but quickly realized what was going on. Amber was bored. Our town wasn't exactly teeming with people her age, and the few who were around didn't seem to meet her standards. It felt natural that we'd spend time together. I had graduated, wasn't her student anymore, and we were both adults, me newly 18 and her 25. So why not? And that's how it began. We started meeting up in the evenings, totally innocent outings at first, movies, dinner at the one decent restaurant. In town, just talking. Amber was kind about letting me slide when it came to paying. She knew I was scraping by on minimum wage, but over time, things shifted. It was me who started pushing the boundaries of our relationship. I'd reach for her hand as we walked, and eventually, we kissed. It wasn't in public, we were careful about that, but it was clear that our connection was growing deeper. Amber taught me a lot of French phrases during that summer and fall. She also encouraged me to think seriously about my future, often nudging me toward enrolling in college. My parents, for their part, didn't object to our relationship. They trusted Amber. To them, she was no longer my teacher, but someone who genuinely cared about me and was a positive influence on my life. Amber even came to see my band perform a few times at the roller rink. Looking back, I'm sure our emo punk metal fusion sound was cringeworthy, but she was gracious enough not to let on. It wasn't until we'd been dating for a couple of months that things became intimate. Again, it was my idea, though Amber admitted she had wanted it to happen ever since we reconnected after graduation. By then, our relationship felt like more than just dating. I was falling for her, and she told me she felt the same. We kept our affection low-key, especially in public, but we weren't hiding. Amber came over to my parents' house occasionally, and they really liked her. She was a huge reason I started turning my life around. I stopped wasting money on drugs and started saving for college. I even began taking general education courses at the local community college. Amber often talked about her plans to move to the West or East Coast to teach at a university, and she made it clear she wanted me to come with her. For the first time, I started to see a future beyond the small town rut I'd been stuck in. But just as things were looking up, everything fell apart. Out of nowhere, Amber was summoned to a meeting with the local school board. Someone had reported that she was in a romantic and sexual relationship with a former student, me. Worse, the complaint alleged that our relationship had begun while I was still a minor and attending high school. Amber denied it all. Of course, every word was false, and she had never crossed any lines while I was her student. She texted me in a panic, and I rushed to the school board meeting. When I arrived, I told them the truth. Yes, I had been in Amber's class in 12th grade, but nothing inappropriate had ever happened between us. We only reconnected after I graduated, and by then I was 18. The board didn't buy it. They treated my testimony as a noble but misguided attempt to cover for her. Their minds were already made up. After a grueling session full of tears and accusations, Amber was given a formal warning. The board ruled that it was unbecoming of a teacher to be seen in public with a former student, regardless of the circumstances. We thought that would be the end of it. We assumed it was just a case of small-town gossip spiraling out of control, but we couldn't help wondering who had reported us in the first place. By that time, I had moved in with Amber, helping with rent as much as I could. I'd even met her parents over webcam. Though they didn't speak much English, Amber filled them in on the details of our relationship, and they were supportive. We tried to move on, believing the worst was behind us. But we were wrong, terribly wrong. In the weeks following the school board meeting, malicious rumors about Amber began to spread like wildfire. People whispered the most vile things about her. My boss at the burger joint suddenly fired me, claiming the store was losing money and that my hairstyle was scaring customers. It was clear to both of us what was really happening. Amber reassured me that it wasn't my fault and promised to support me while I looked for another job. What we didn't realize was that the worst was yet to come. Amber's life took a nosedive the day she got fired. She'd been working as a probationary teacher, which meant that during her first 2 years, she could be dismissed for any reason or no reason at all. Tenure protections didn't apply, but we both knew why she was really being let go. The district framed it as her being an ineffective teacher, but that was a thin excuse. I looked into the data myself, pulling up the district's standardized test scores. In Amber's subject area, the number of students performing well had jumped by double digits during her time at the school, far above the state average. Since her departure, those same scores have plummeted. Amber always said students responded well to her, and it wasn't hard to see why. She had been immensely popular even when I was in her class, and it was more than just her looks. She genuinely cared about her students and made learning engaging. When news broke about her firing, the students were furious. Some even threatened to stage a protest. But Amber, ever the calm and collected person, urged them to focus on their studies and welcomed the new teacher who would replace her. My dad suggested she sue the district, but Amber didn't want the drama. Instead, she accepted their offer to resign, sparing her record the stigma of being fired outright. In return, the district promised not to revoke her teaching credential. Her parents urged her to come back to France, but Amber was determined to stay in America and rebuild her life. My parents, who had grown to love and respect her, offered to let her move in with us while she figured out her next steps. Luckily, her parents were financially stable and sent her some money to relocate. Amber asked me to come with her to start fresh in California. She told me she loved me and wanted us to build a life together. The idea of moving to California had always been a dream of mine, so I didn't hesitate. My parents were supportive, happy that I was with someone who clearly cared for me and even gave us some money to help with the move. We settled in the Los Angeles area and rented a small apartment. Neither of us drove, so we bought bikes to get around. The city was a world apart from the sleepy town I grew up in. For Amber, who had spent her teenage years in Paris, the adjustment wasn't as jarring. I enrolled in a local community college and found a job as a waiter at a popular French restaurant. The place had a unique gimmick. Some of the servers actually spoke French. Thanks to the months of French lessons Amber had given me, I quickly became a hit with the customers, adding authenticity to their dining experience. Amber, however, faced hurdle after hurdle. The district's promise not to revoke her teaching credential turned out to be misleading. While they hadn't taken her license away, they had attached an official reprimand to it, accusing her of inappropriate relations with students. This flag appeared on every application she submitted, immediately raising concerns. On top of that, prospective employers noticed the circumstances of her resignation. "No, I wasn't fired," Amber would explain. "I resigned." "Yes," they'd reply, but the record shows it was a forced resignation to avoid termination for cause. Amber was blindsided. She wasn't used to the kind of institutional pettiness and nastiness that I, having grown up in small-town America, understood all too well. Everywhere she applied, doors slammed shut. She appealed to the state teaching license organization, but months passed with no progress. Calls to her former school led nowhere. No one had any answers. For months, I shouldered most of the financial burden, covering our bills with my restaurant job. Both of our parents helped with loans, and without their support, we wouldn't have made it. One day, Amber came home and made 2 life-changing announcements. "You know what? Fuck trying to teach public school. Oh, and OP, I'm pregnant." We were overwhelmed with joy. Months later, we tied the knot in a beautiful Los Angeles wedding surrounded by family. Amber's parents flew in from France, and my family came from back home. It was a simple but joyous occasion. And afterward, we honeymooned in France, pregnancy and all. Now we're parents to a beautiful baby boy, Richelieu. I'm nearing the completion of my associate's degree in information technology, and I've been promoted to maitre d' at the restaurant, a role that comes with health benefits for Amber and Richelieu. We live in a spacious studio apartment, modest, but enough for our little family. Amber stays home with the baby. but hasn't given up on her passion for teaching. She now works remotely, teaching English and French courses for a private online school. Though she's blacklisted from public K-12 schools, she's found a way to do what she loves. Life isn't perfect, but it's ours. We've built something beautiful together, despite everything. And for that, I'm grateful every day. Months passed and life was looking up. I had landed my first IT job troubleshooting computers for a small company downtown. The pay was double what I made at the restaurant, and the company offered an incredible deal. I could finish my bachelor's degree while working, with half the tuition covered by the employer, and the other half deducted in small monthly installments. I jumped at the opportunity. With the better pay, we moved to a bigger apartment, a cozy place that gave us some much-needed breathing room. Amber, as always, was making her mark both as an amazing mother and by tutoring, contributing to our growing finances. We were even planning for her to go back to school, eventually to earn her graduate degrees so she could fulfill her dream of teaching college. Then Amber hit me with another piece of wonderful news one evening. Oh, more good news, OP, I'm pregnant again. Life was sweet, and we were both thrilled. Amidst this happiness, I got a text from my mom one day. She'd been attending a local school board meeting with some neighbors to discuss a proposal to hire more teachers. Over the years, the town had grown enough to justify expanding the high school. Guess it's a two-horse town now, she joked. While at the meeting, my mom ran into Jerry's mom. For context, Jerry had been the bassist in my old band before I quit to focus on my relationship with Amber. My mom had never met Jerry or his family before, which made the next part of her story surprising. She overheard Jerry's mom and another woman talking about Amber and me. Apparently, Jerry had been the one who started the rumors about Amber and me having sex before I graduated. His mom, who was a teacher at Amber's school, had gone straight to the school board with the accusations. Their identities as informants had been protected under confidentiality. It stung to hear this. I'd lost touch with Jerry long ago, and we hadn't been close in years. But back when we were friends, he had been my drug supplier. Jerry was the guy who could get you anything you wanted. Looking back, I knew he resented how much time I spent with Amber. Once our relationship got serious, it was even sadder when I thought about how good our friendship had been before things went south, and now learning that he was the reason my wife, Amber, lost. Her career made it all worse. Adding insult to injury, Jerry's mom was one of those people who presented herself as a paragon of virtue, a prim and proper teacher whose life was squeaky clean. Meanwhile, her son was the town's biggest drug dealer. It was almost laughable. On top of that, Jerry probably had a crush on Amber back in the day and couldn't stand the fact that I ended up with her. When I told Amber about what I'd learned, I asked her what she remembered about Jerry's mom. Her answer was telling. She was always mean to me, Amber said. She was one of the main people who made sure I was excluded from any teacher social activities. Honestly, it's one of the reasons I never made any real friends among the staff. Amber explained that the male teachers were generally nice to her at first, but most of the female teachers had despised her from the start. She revealed that Jerry's mom had been the ringleader of a petition to have her contract terminated after her first year. This was news to me. Amber said only a handful of female teachers signed the petition, but it was still placed in her personnel file as evidence that she lacked the confidence of her colleagues. The whole thing had been a setup to push her out. Despite her excellent teaching record and her popularity with students, it felt like a slap in the face, but it also explained a lot. At this point, I was more Californian than Iowan, but I still kept in touch with a few people from high school, including Gabe, the drummer from our old band. Through the grapevine, I heard that Jerry now managed the burger joint where I used to work. The previous owner had retired, leaving the place in Jerry's hands. I don't use social media much. My profile is practically a blank slate, but curiosity got the better of me. I logged in and checked Jerry's profile. Sure enough, there he was, running the restaurant. From there, I clicked on some of his friends' profiles and stumbled across his mom's. Recognizing her instantly, I saw that she was now on the school board. Still sanctimonious as ever, her posts were a mix of self-righteousness and small-town gossip. It got me thinking about the kind of place I grew up in a small town. There's often not much for kids to do, which leads to boredom, dumb stunts, and for some of us, drugs. Jerry and I had been part of the worst crowd at one point, and like the geniuses we were, we'd even recorded ourselves partying. and talking trash, evidence of the stupidity we used to revel in. Amber's struggles with Jerry's mom suddenly made even more sense. This wasn't just about professionalism or morality, it was personal. And now, years later, the consequences of those petty, small-town dynamics were still rippling through our lives. Our band had a tradition of documenting every chaotic moment. Whenever we had a show, we'd break out our cell phones and film ourselves rocking out, skating, chugging beers in abandoned lots, and yes, getting high. We even talked directly into the camera, spouting all kinds of nonsense. It was reckless, dumb, and completely us. I hadn't thought about those old recordings in years, but being the sentimental pack rat that I am, I've never thrown out a single phone. I keep them like dusty file cabinets full of memories, texts, photos, videos, all untouched. I don't even bother transferring data from one phone to the next. Aside from phone numbers, when I remembered those videos, I knew I might find something useful among them. First, I casually asked Amber if her current job knew anything about the drama from our old town. She told me they did, but they didn't care. All they care about is that I teach expert-level conversational French. She said her clients, mostly traveling professionals, valued her expertise, not her past. Her employer even had a reputation for hiring people with actual felonies on their records, believing in second chances. Copacetic, I replied, so I started digging through my old phones. Sure enough, finding videos of Jerry getting high was easy. Nearly every recording from those days featured him stoned out of his mind, bragging about his exploits. He talked about how his parents knew he was not only using drugs but dealing them. They want to ship me off to the army and make a man out of me, he said in one clip. Laughing, I kept searching for the golden video, the one that would expose the hypocrisy of his sanctimonious mom. Finally, on my old Galaxy phone, I found it. In this video, Jerry talked about how his mom not only knew about his drug use, but had her own skeletons in the closet. He claimed she smoked weed with his dad, and admitted she once got caught snorting cocaine. My dad kicked my ass for having coke, Jerry said to the camera. But the next day, I came home from school, and there she was, coked out on the kitchen table. The video was time-stamped. This was it. This was what I needed. But I didn't tell Amber yet. She didn't need to know, not while she was pregnant. It would only upset her. Instead, I reached out to my mom for contact info for all the local school board members. I already had the emails for most of my former teachers and administrators. The benefits of small-town life. People don't move much. I created a throwaway email account and attached all the relevant videos. Then I hit send us to everyone who mattered in that tiny town. The school board, the teachers, the administrators, even the owners of the pizza place and roller rink. Everyone. They all received evidence of Jerry, bragging about his drug dealing, his parents' indulgences, and their hypocrisy. The next morning, Amber asked me why I was in such a good mood. I told her everything. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she wasn't upset. No, I'm not sad, she said. I'm just so happy you did this for me. Later that day, we went for a walk. Amber, Richelieu in the stroller, and our growing family in tow. The sun was shining, and life felt good. So, the fallout. What happened next was almost poetic. In a small town, gossip spreads like wildfire. And in this case, the videos weren't just gossip, they were damning. Jerry's antics and his mom's hypocrisy became the talk of the town. Rumors turned into investigations. Investigations turned into consequences. First, Jerry got fired from his job managing the burger joint. The police raided his house, his mom's house, to be precise, and uncovered a sizable stash of drugs. As it turned out, Jerry hadn't been exaggerating in those videos. When the high school caught wind of this, they began questioning students who had been busted for drugs. Under pressure, several of them admitted that Jerry was their supplier. Oops, guess he was telling the truth. After all, Jerry ended up in jail. As for his mom, she was dismissed from her school board position and lost her teaching job. Her career was over, blacklisted for child endangerment, fraud, and drug use. My mom heard whispers that Jerry's dad might face charges too. Adding to the chaos, it came out that Jerry's dad had been cheating on his wife for years with a woman from the church, no less. The entire family became pariahs. They wanted to leave town, but pending court cases kept them stuck. In the meantime, they were shunned by everyone. And me? I kept my distance from the mess, watching it all unfold from across the country. Small town justice. In a small town, everyone knows everyone, or at least everyone knows their business. It didn't take long for people to piece together that I was the one who sent the videos. They dropped the pretense of confidentiality, and the whispers began. Do I care? Not even a little. Jerry, if you're listening, come at me, bro.